Let's break the political talk show mold. Anything worth doing is hard, and that includes being a good citizen. Our mission is to help you be that better citizen by letting you hear about stuff you might not know, which will make everyone think you're so smart, or by giving you a chance to listen to interviews and debates on a wide variety of subjects that might actually allow you to form new opinions in the privacy of your own mind. I'm Justin Oldham, and you are listening to the Politics and Patriotism Show here on the Stitcher Smart Radio Network. Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome to a very special edition of the Politics and Patriotism Show. This is our 400th episode. Now, this is the sort of thing that people usually rock the house for by way of celebration, so we decided to put our own spin on that concept by going deep into the vault, very far into the dusty back in search of our roots. Check, check. We journeyed to distant lands and fought our way past untold horrors to reach the oldest set of recordings that we have that go all the way back to the earliest days of the show when nobody knew who we were, knew what we were capable of, and that's when we found it. After fighting our way past the zombies, disarming the traps, and opening the innermost doors of the vault, we knew that we had found it. So, instead of rocking the house for our 400th episode, we'd like to bring you an episode in which we talk to the maximum rocker himself. I'm talking about Allen Nesbit. He's a professionally respected and very well-known heavy metal guitarist. And as you're about to hear, he and I actually have some history. Now, before we get started, I just want you to know this is not all fun and games. While me and my fellow show contributors are just as pleased as we can be that we've made it this far, we would like you to pay attention to what Al has to say, because the journey that you take in life does matter. Doing the things you're most passionate about does matter, because that really gets to the core of your civic values. You know, if you're doing what you love the most, then it isn't really work. And, now that I think about it, that could explain how and why it is that we made it to episode 400. So, get comfortable, turn on your favorite internet surfing device, and get ready to find out how Al Nesbit reached heavy metal enlightenment. Oh, and just in case you're not sure what that sounds like, Al has graciously given us a little taste to open the show with.
My name's Allen Nesbit. Guitar player, old classmate of Justin's here, and glad to be with you guys tonight. Thanks so much. Playing the guitar, I grew up, I was lucky enough to have my dad actually be a guitar player, and I remember some of my earliest memories of him just, playing the guitar and me watching him do that. And there was always a neat feeling I had when I watched him play. And, we moved to Alaska my freshman year in high school, so it was 1980. I'm going to date myself. It was 1980, and literally the first 6 or 7 weeks after I'd been there for 6 or 7 weeks, it was like 40 below zero. It was dark. It was cold. It was miserable. And so my freshman year, I was pretty, I was just trying to get my bearings. I was kind of lost in high school my first year, and didn't have a whole lot of friends. And so going into my sophomore year is when the end of my it was about mid sophomore year, I picked up the guitar, and as soon as I picked it up, I knew it's what I wanted to do, for the most part. And there was something that clicked with that, and I kind of had my identity at that point. I felt like this was something I really wanted to do. So it was a great connection. I heard a guitar player by the name of Randy Rhoads, who at the time was playing for Ozzy Osbourne, but his guitar playing wasn't just heavy and rocky. There was a lot of melody and a lot of classicalness to it, and I gravitated toward that right away. and I became pretty consumed with learning scales and classical theory and things like that. So that was kind of the early beginnings of me playing guitar. It was a lot of fun. A great place to start.
Now tell us about that very special and very expensive phone call that you made.
Yeah, it was funny. I was literally, I had read in Guitar Player magazine. I think Justin, this is the one that's with the Joe Satriani phone call, and I had read in Guitar Player magazine, and I'd been playing probably for 3 or 4 years at this point. And that Steve Vai was a new guitar player that was coming out. He had just gotten a gig with Alcatraz and was starting to play for David Lee Roth and starting to get a really big name for himself. And one of the people that he had mentioned was his guitar teacher, the guy that actually taught him, by the name of Joe Satriani, and who Steve Vai had mentioned was living in San Francisco at the time. And this is way before Google, way before cell phones and everything else. This is when you could still call 411 in a particular area, 415-555-1212 and actually get somebody's phone number. And so I called the San Francisco directory and actually got Joe Satriani's phone number. And, at this point, nobody really knew who he was outside of San Francisco. And, some of the students, and other than the Guitar Player, Guitar World magazine mentioned, nobody really knew who he was. And, it was really great. I called him up. I gathered up enough nerve to actually give him a ring and did so. And he talked with me for, probably close to an hour. And he was very, very, very welcoming, very humble. And, we talked guitars and we talked theory and, what he had his students doing, because I was all the way up in Alaska. And, if you think about it, it was before the internet. It was before, MTV was just starting to come out. So all you really had was guitar magazines and things like that. So there wasn't anything there was no YouTube. And so it was really, you had to grasp, you had to grasp whatever bits of information and knowledge you possibly could from any source. So he was a wonderful gentleman to have a conversation with, in terms of what music books to buy, study this theory. And during that conversation, I kind of made a switch that, I became a lifelong student of the instrument rather than trying to be a rock star, or trying to be a guy that just tried to get a record deal. And I really sort of garnered a love for the instrument on a lot deeper level. As a result of that conversation, it was one of those defining moments in my guitar playing career that definitely made a switch, made a direction change for sure.
My father told me time and time and again as I grew up that the most important thing to do was to figure out who you are, what you're good at, and then to do both at the same time. But he also gave me another important piece of wisdom. He said time and again, if you want a seat at the table, you have to ask, because nobody's ever going to give it to you. Now, one of the things I find so inspiring about your story is that you asked, you made the phone call. And at least 3 different times in my life, I have stepped out of the shadows and I've talked to notable people, and I was scared to death every time I did it, but they said yes, and here I am today. So I applaud you for what you've done, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you here on the show, is so people could hear your story from the source, and also to hear about your philosophy, because I think that you're a very enlightened man for somebody who's done so much headbanging.
Yeah, thanks, Jeffrey. Yeah, you're right. And you never really get anywhere without, asking, and you got to get uncomfortable. And when you get in positions where you're uncomfortable, that's when there's growth. And if you're always comfortable and you're always thinking, this is okay, every day is okay, and it's always the same, it's almost like Groundhog's Day. There's not going to be much growth. And the times that I've been most uncomfortable, if I look back on it, have probably been the times that have led to the most growth in anything I do. Whether it was guitar playing or, a relationship with somebody or, a career or something outside of the music industry. It's always been scary. But yeah, man, you gotta stretch. You gotta be bigger than yourself, to grow and to hopefully inspire others. That's what it's all about, is giving something back too, and that's one of the reasons why I love teaching as much as I do, because, I had a couple great teachers and, of course, the Joe Satriani conversation and stuff, and being able to give something back to, somebody and help them grow musically or whatever, has been, I find inspiration in that as well. It's good stuff.
Well, I'd like to point out to our listeners that if they want to know more about you, they can go to allennesbit.com, where they can see more about your life story and check out the programs that you're involved in. And speaking of that, if you would, please give a shameless plug there for that musical institution that you work for.
Yeah, I actually am I'm teaching at Bellevue American Music, which is one of the very cooler, one of the most cool music stores in the Seattle area over on the east side. Fantastic. A gentleman by the name of Reese owns it. Great guy. They've got great instruments, great staff, and they've always been there to help me. I actually shopped there way long time before I actually started teaching there, so it's been awesome. It's been awesome to go ahead and teach there as well.
Now, my first real serious exposure to metal music came in the winter of 1980 when somebody lent me a cassette copy of Judas Priest, British Steel,
Right.
and it was like having a heart attack, sitting there in the chair and then surviving it. And I said to myself, I don't know what in the hell this is, but I like it, and I have been following it ever since, and following Ozzy and everything else that has come since. I've been fascinated by the evolution of metal and the many subgenres that have popped up over time. And since you've had a chance to live some of the lifestyle, I'd like to know, what have you learned in the last 20 years watching this art form evolve?
It's been pretty amazing, and I think that, when I was fortunate enough to come on and really start playing guitar at a time when, I didn't say metal, but music had really, it was still, God, it sounds really bad to say this, but it was still real musical, I mean, we were coming out of the 70s, the 80s was starting to come out with heavy metal. We had Judas Priest, Iron Maiden was just starting to come on board, Ozzy was coming on board with his solo career. Bands like that, I mean, hadn't really, come completely full around yet. They were still blossoming, and that was so cool. It was such an amazing thing, and there were so many people involved with it. And I think the musicality of it was just phenomenal. I mean, you can look at all these players and what they were doing in the mid to late 70s and everything, the guys in Judas Priest, and how heavy and Black Sabbath, these bands that were around before. People don't even think about how limited the equipment was back then, but how they could get all these tones and everything out of these amps that were pretty prehistoric almost. It was just phenomenal. They really had to sort of invent things on the fly, and it really became an identifiable piece of their sound. And then, to have the equipment start advancing, techniques, I think you can really start seeing guitar playing really take a fundamental change when Eddie Van Halen and Randy Rhoads came out. Yngwie Malmsteen was another one that came out and sort of redefined where guitar playing was going, in the rock, / metal genre. And then, since then there's so many great players because, I guess that's what I've always loved about metal is it's guitar centric. It really is, and so they always have great guitar players. Most of them do, and it's always been just sort of a great area where a guitar player can come in and shine and do some solos and actually, show off a little bit. And that's always been a great place. It's funny because we've got the sort of after coming back from Europe, something I wasn't really that aware of, but like Viking metal. I mean, there's a lot. Europe's got a lot of really, really black metal bands. And when I say dark, it's just, I don't mean, it's really, to me, it's almost too heavy. There's not enough musicality to it. I know that people aren't really going to be a big fan of me saying that, but, I like there to be heaviness to it, but I also like there to be melody. I like some of the new stuff that's out right now, like Avenged Sevenfold and some of the bands like that, because there's great guitar playing, there's great singing, and there's, the songs themselves are still good. But man, I'm a guitar player. And so for me to even be interested in it, I've got to hear some really good guitar playing. I've got to hear something catchy and, or something that is just so stunning that it's going to take my ear right away. And that's what I look for. I really do,
I am not a musician. I do not have a musical bone in my body. I just know what I like, and I don't see very well. I'm legally blind since the day I was born, and so the trade-off there is I have really good ears. And I really do enjoy putting on the headphones and put the for the typical sound system I use, I'll listen at about 70% volume just because it's right there, it's right perfect, and I can just close my eyes and I can hear the subtleties in the guitar work that you're talking about, and that really just grabs me in a way that no other form of music does.
This program is brought to you by ShadowFusionBooks.com.
We got your six, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, I think the wonderful thing about the guitar is, I have been fortunate enough to play with some really, really great players and to hear some amazing, almost, virtuoso type players. And, the, the fascinating thing is not only do you get almost any sound that you possibly can dream of out of guitar and equipment nowadays, but everybody has their own voice on the instrument too. And I learned things from students that haven't been playing for longer than 6 months, and they just show me a different way of doing something. It shows me a different way of looking at it because you're seeing it through somebody else's eyes. When they say, "Okay, could I do it this way?" for instance. And I've always been attracted about that with the guitar. Whether it's tones, where you're playing acoustic guitar, or my favorite music out there. And this is going to be so anti-metal, but it's not. It's flamenco guitar. I think the Spanish flamenco players, if you actually hook that up into a Marshall stack or something, which is some of the most mind-numbing things that people could possibly hear. But even though it's cleanly played on like a nylon string guitar, it's still really heavy, and they're blazing scales and fantastic chord arrangements and things like that. And it's phenomenal the subtleties that a guitar can bring. That if you pick it harder, it's louder. If you pick it softer, it's obviously quieter in volume. But part of that is that journey of a player is to learn all those nuances and all those subtleties that you have to go ahead and to have, I think, to bring your own unique voice to the table and play it as good as you possibly can. I mean, I still love to practice. I still try to practice at least an hour or a few times a week because I just love to play. So for me, it's not a burden or anything to actually sit down and play the guitar. It's something I still love, and I love it as much as I did the day I picked it up. And I think that once if you can make it past your first year, I think playing the guitar, I think that you stand a good chance of really diving in and becoming the musician that you want to be, because it's a frustrating year. And I tell all my students that. But once they get back that, to get past that year, that's when you start really hearing things on the instrument, and, it strikes things inside of you, and that brings out the artistic element of it. And, that really ultimately is what it's all about.
Okay, tell me about your connection to Ronnie James Dio.
Well, it's so funny, Justin. I would... The guy that got me playing guitar was Randy Rhoads, and I think I told you that. I mean, the first couple Ozzy solo albums, Diary of a Madman and Blizzard of Oz, got me hooked on the electric guitar. And I had started playing, but I got to be honest with you, after those two albums, I was kind of hungry for something of equal caliber in terms of guitar playing, in terms of songwriting, something that just sort of grabbed me. And there wasn't a whole lot out there at the time. I mean, I was really on a path just to sort of, find out and listen to as much stuff that sparked my interest as I could, but there just wasn't really that much out there. And I remember going to the old Hoyt's Music there in Fairbanks, and there was this girl, and I said, "What do you got that's good?" And she goes, "Well, we have this new album out by Ronnie James Dio. He was the guy that was with Black Sabbath." And I was like, "Okay, well, let me hear it," and so she put it on, and from the first track all the way down, I mean, I listened to probably, 6 tracks from that whole album, before I bought it. And it was phenomenal. The guitar playing was phenomenal. The songwriting was phenomenal. And his voice was truly something special. And I recognized that right away. I had an immediate attraction to it. I didn't know why. It was kind of like what you were saying with Judas Priest. It was like, why why am I finding this so appealing? And I just had that attraction to it. And, man, I wore that first album out. I did, because the guitar playing was phenomenal. And, again, the songwriting was fantastic. And his voice was just amazing. And his songwriting, the stuff he was singing about, for some reason I had a connection to, and I felt that. And that's when, that was my first experience with Ronnie James Dio. I've been a huge fan ever since. And, through all the different incarnations of Black Sabbath that he was with, and his solo career, and then, old Rainbow stuff, that he was doing in the 70s with, Richie Blackmore and all that, I really became a fan of that stuff later, because it was that first solo album, Holy Diver, that got me hooked on him. And so I was here in Seattle. To be truth, I hadn't really played anything professionally in about 10 years, and I started playing guitar, a little bit more frequently, and then I saw this ad in the back of a music magazine here in Seattle, and basically it was, for a Dio tribute band, and I was like, well, that sounds pretty cool, So I called the guy up, and it ended up being the singer of this friend of mine. I had a buddy who was a guitar player at the time, and he had left, and it was actually the band that he was in. So, the guy knew that I played guitar pretty well, and so I got invited to join, and that was basically 2.5 years ago. And so we've seen a lot of changes in the band. We've got a totally new lineup, except the bass player now, I think, is the only original member. But it's been a fantastic journey. I mean, we've really been able to do a lot of the catalog of Ronnie James Dio himself, not any specific band that he was in, and that's what's really attractive about it for me, is that we really get to play a lot of different era stuff. And it's been a wonderful journey. We just got back from Ireland a little while ago, and there's talk of more travel and being able to go out and being able to play these songs for fans for Ronnie James Dio. And we all have that connection, and I'm a fan of his, and so I don't really look at it like we're any better or anything else besides fans with all the other fans that are there with us. So for me, it's more of a celebration of Ronnie James Dio's music than us. I could care less if there was 50 people or 500,000 people there. I still get the same satisfaction because I'm a huge fan. And so for me, it's getting to hang out with other fans, and I get to play the music, and they get to listen, but we get to talk about how great he was after the shows. And he's been passed away now for about 2 years. And so it's really been a great time, to bring this music back out in the forefront and remind people how amazing and how incredible he was, because his fans are some of the most loyal people you'll ever meet, and they love his music. And I've seen people in tears at some of our shows because it's like they miss him and they miss that music. And so for us to be able to, fellow fans, to be able to bring that music to them, as it was, over in Ireland, it was an amazing experience. It really was.
I've noticed with a lot of tribute bands in general that the fans are always extraordinarily grateful for the experience, no matter how good or bad the musicians really are.
Yeah, it's funny because it is like a double-edged sword. I think that the interesting thing is, in the situation that we're in, Ronnie's not around anymore, and there's a void there. There really is. I mean, there's a lot of guys that can sound like him and everything like that. But if anybody hears or watches some YouTube video or hears what other people had to say about him, they always say the same thing. They say how gracious he was, how he appreciated every single fan, how he went out of his way to make the fans feel like they were very important to him, because from what it seems like, each and every one of them were. And in the rock industry, there's just not that many people around with that kind of integrity and that sort of that have the priorities that straight. And people pick up on that, and so there's a void there. And so us being able to, thankfully our singer sounds a lot like Ronnie James Dio, and we're able to go ahead and like I said, celebrate with all the other fans that are there with us. And it's a special experience because unlike, let's say, a Motley Crue tribute or, a Judas Priest tribute, Ronnie's not around anymore. And so, we really try to capture the integrity of the music and the spirit of what he was all about when we perform. So that's definitely a priority for us, for sure.
Does the tribute band have its own website?
It does. It does. It's www.diorising.com. So DIORISING.com. And we recently changed our name. We were Stand Up and Shout from our incarnation until about 6 months ago. And we wanted something that wasn't, Stand Up and Shout was actually a Dio song. And we wanted something that had a little bit more, enormity to it. Dio, obviously we've got his name. Rising is one of the songs and albums from Rainbow that he did with Richie Blackmore. And so we wanted, because we do the whole, basically all the genres, all the different incarnations of the bands he was in, from Rainbow to Black Sabbath to Dio to, Heaven and Hell, and, basically all the bands in between. So we even do some old Nevermore, or some old Elf songs, one of which is Nevermore. But, that stuff he did, back in the early 70s, and it's kind of honky-tonk stuff, and it's really phenomenally, the changes,
Okay, so now you and I started off our association in high school, just a bunch of gangly kids, and we had some small sense of our future. And I knew I was going to be a writer, and I turned out to be that way. You knew you were going to be a musician, and you turned out to be that way. But how does life feel now that you're a dad over the age of 30? Let's just say, to be kind.
Yeah, thanks, Justin. I appreciate that. It's strange because it's had its challenges. I'm not. It sounds funny, but I don't look like all the other dads, and a lot of the other dads have, not that I don't have a corporate job, because I do. I don't do music full time, but I talk about different things, and I feel perpetually young, and I don't know why. I think it's just because I'm honestly and full-time involved with music on some level. So having kids and everything. The neat thing is that my oldest daughter is 20, and thankfully I'm still the cool dad to her and her friends and everything. And she says on her Facebook page, she's got pictures of me from over in Ireland and stuff, and she goes, "Yeah, my dad, really kicks butt," and stuff like that, it makes you feel good. It does. But I know that I'm different from most of the dads that are out there, and it's taken a little bit to get used to, because I've had to sort of accept, that, yeah, this is who I am, even though not everybody else is, like that. And but it's cool. I've got a good, healthy balance, and my kids are awesome. They're all, my two youngest are involved in sports, and I don't know if they're going to be involved in music or not. My oldest daughter's pretty artsy, and so I expect her to do something. It looks that way anyway, towards the arts, maybe not musicianship, but she's a great writer. She's very witty. She's very smart. So it's neat to be able to, and I guess if there's one thing, I've sort of impressed upon my kids is what, my dad basically told me. He goes, "If this is what you're going to do, then do it, and do it as good as you possibly can." And he always sort of supported me being a musician, although I'm sure that he would love to have seen me go, become a lawyer or a doctor or something. But he never said anything negative about it. But he did say, if you're going to do it as good as you possibly can. And that's something that I've pretty much stuck with, to this day, and that applies to everything. I mean, in order to do anything and be successful at it, you got to, push yourself. And like we were talking about earlier, you got to be uncomfortable. You got to push yourself out of your comfort zone and be bigger than you are. And I try to let my kids know that as well. Those are life lessons that we can actually pass along to our kids. And I think that, that's something to be really proud of. And to see that instilled in them, and to see them use that is probably the biggest source of satisfaction I get as a human being, almost, being able to see that. So it's neat. It's very neat.
Well, Al, thanks very much for your time. We have come to the end of a very speedy half hour, and aside from alnesbit.com and, AllenNesbit.com and dorising.com, are there any other websites we should be paying attention to?
That is pretty much it. I do have, I'm involved in another band, and it's an original project, and it's called Years of War. So if you go to www.yearsofwar.com, it's basically all put together, obviously, a URL. You can kind of hear some of the original stuff that I'm working on with an amazing singer by the name of Rain Stone, who has been in a lot of different projects, including an original project with one of the guitar players from Queensryche. And so he's just phenomenal. He's a fantastic writer, and it's just been a really great project. And I'm really excited because on the 23rd of June here in Seattle, we're playing at the Hard Rock Cafe. And so Years of War is basically opening up for Dio Rising, so I get to play in both bands, so I get double duty that night. I'm really looking forward to that. Should be a good night.
It's not obvious, but many of the things in our life that we experience, both good and bad, do influence our politics, and they certainly do influence our patriotism. The full package that makes us who and what we are, our personality, our feelings, our skill set, is derived from a very long journey. And it's real easy to forget that when we get bogged down in the minutiae of partisan politics, which is actually why I'm glad to be able to take the opportunity of this 400th episode to shift gears, tune it down a notch, and bring you something that's a little different and yet still pointed in the same civic direction that I like to keep most of these conversations going in. So if you like what you heard here today, you can find us online at politicsandpatriotism.com, where you can click on the RSS feed at the top of the page, which will allow you to download all of our past episodes to your favorite MP3 device. We don't even charge you anything for that. Or you could go to the iTunes store, and with a few quick clicks, you can get all of our past episodes for free in that same fashion as well. Or you could go to Stitcher.com, and thanks to the very nice people at the Stitcher Smart Radio Network who distribute this program for us, you can download any of their free apps that'll allow you to hear us through your Apple smartphone, your Android device, or your tablet, wherever you might happen to be, whether you're rocking out or not. So on behalf of everyone here at the show, thank you for your time and have a good day.